The following video contains scenes that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
One of the most renowned serial killers in history, Jack the Ripper's acts of violence have captivated the public's attention for more than a century. While many aspects of his identity and objectives are still unknown, analysts have examined his behavior and offered some understanding of his thought patterns. While certain speculations point towards his troubled childhood and potential psychological disorders, others speculate that he may have been driven by a deep resentment of women. In any event, learning more about the psychology of a serial killer like Jack the Ripper can be extremely insightful. Welcome to the Bleeding Truth YouTube channel. To know about some of the scary crime facts, click the subscribe button, and make sure to hit the bell icon if you don't want to miss out on our new videos. In 1888, Jack the Ripper afflicted London, killing a minimum of 5 women and dissecting their bodies in bizarre ways, showing that he had expertise in human anatomy. Jack the Ripper is still one of the most notorious crimes in both England and the rest of the globe since the killer was never found or even identified. From August 7 to September 10, 1888, all 5 of the murders that have been linked to Jack the Ripper took place in or close to the Whitechapel neighbourhood of London's East End, all within 1 mile of one another. The murderer, known only as Leather Apron, has also been suspected in a number of other killings that took place around that time. The canonical 5 victims were Mary Ann Nichols, whose body was discovered on August 31, Annie Chapman, who was discovered on September 8, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine, Kate Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. The general belief at the time was that all the victims were prostitutes. Mary Ann Polly Nichols, a 44-year-old lady, was one of them. Nichols was the first recognized canonical victim of the so-called Jack the Ripper serial killer. At least 4 more women would be killed by this violent psychopath, but the killer's identity has remained a mystery despite numerous inquiries. Nichols had worked as a domestic helper in London, but she had trouble keeping it because of her alcoholism. She relocated to a shared lodging house after quitting her job. Nichols was last seen heading in the direction of Whitechapel Road. About an hour later, someone found her dead. The manner in which Nichols was killed was horrifying. 2 deep cuts, one of which had totally torn the flesh down to the vertebrae, ran down Nichols' throat. Nichols had been horribly wounded in addition to being killed. Annie Chapman, 47, was found dead a week after the dreadful finding of Nichols' body on Saturday, September 8. Chapman, like Nichols, was an alcoholic who used prostitution as a means of support while living in a hotel. Like Nichols, Chapman's throat had been cut. Her voice box was destroyed. If she could have screamed, she couldn't. She had been completely disemboweled and her abdomen was sliced apart. After such a brutal murder, the killer attacked again during the early morning hours on September 30, 1888. Louis Deemschutz discovered Elizabeth Stride's 44-year-old body as he drove his horse onto a wheeled cart. He was the steward of the International Working Men's Education Club. Stride's body was in a neighboring, darkened yard. Her dead body wasn't heavily mangled, unlike the previous victims. However, blood continued to pour from a single knife wound to the throat, and the woman remained warm. It appears from this that Stride had only recently passed away before Deemschutz arrived. Her lack of wounds and mutilation led many to speculate that Jack the Ripper did not kill her. On the night of her murder, 46-year-old Catherine Eddowes had been out drinking. By 8:30 p.m., she had been brought into custody to sober up due to her extreme intoxication. At 1 a.m., she was let go. A mile away from Stride's body in Mitre Square, hers was discovered. Eddowes' throat had been surgically cut off like that of the other victims. Her bowels were also removed from her body and draped over her right shoulder. According to the police physician who performed the post-mortem on Eddowes' body, the wounds could have taken at least 5 minutes to finish them. This time, the clue was conveniently left at the crime scene. Police discovered a piece of Eddowes' bleeding apron in a doorway in Gulfton Street, a short distance from Mitre Square. The wall just over the apron was a chalk inscription that said, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." The statement seemed to suggest that a Jew or the Jews were to blame for the string of killings. Since graffiti was widespread in Whitechapel, it is unknown if the statement was scrawled by the murderer who placed the apron there on purpose or if it was accidental and unrelated to the case. The final identified victim of Jack the Ripper was Mary Jane Kelly. At only 25, she was far younger than the other victims. Kelly had a similar way of life to the other 4 victims. She was a prostitute. Kelly was murdered within the small space she was renting at 13 Miller's Court, which is off Dorset Street. George Hutchinson, the witness, last saw Kelly alive. Around 2 in the morning, they met on Commercial Street. He then started walking in the direction of Thrall Street when a well-dressed man stopped to pick him up. She then escorted him to her apartment on Dorset Street. The following morning, the horrifying finding of her body was found. Thomas Boyer, a former soldier who worked for Kelly's landlord John McCarthy, was ordered to collect the rent. Boyer knocked on her door. As there was no response when he watched inside with a broken window, Boyer discovered Kelly's severely dismembered body on the bed, which is why he immediately called the police to report his horrifying find. In a murder case of this nature, police lacked many of the tools that their modern-day equivalents would take for granted. This comprised psychological assessment, contemporary forensics, and fingerprinting. Even photographs of crime scenes remained a recent development that just wasn't used as often as it is now. George Lusk, the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee's president, got a 3-inch square cardboard box through the mail on October 16, 1888. A letter and, frighteningly, a human kidney preserved in wine were both found within. Despite the fact that the kidney was similar to one taken from Catherine Edel insofar as it was taken off the left side according to medical sources, without DNA testing. However, I hope you have a pretty good idea of why Jack the Ripper became a serial killer. Thanks for being to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and tell us what you think about this video below in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.